At some point, the silence that you experience within you will become more audible than the noise that you hear outside. At that very moment, the life that you have constructed, the one that you present to the world, starts to shake. Not because there is something wrong, but rather because something that is dishonest is falling apart. In this way, the process of awakening starts. It was not with light or with happiness, but rather with a silent collapse, a knowledge that you cannot unknow, and a fracture in the mask that you have worn for such a long time that you forgot it was any longer your skin. You're not prepared for this by anyone. When they talk about waking, they talk about it as if it were an arrival, a hilltop, a sacred spark, or an unexpected tranquility. However, the reality is that waking is like a wildfire. Initially, it is not illuminated. Rather, it is burned. The lies that you told yourself in order to survive are extinguished by it. It lays waste to the identities that you held to in order to protect yourself. It destroys the dreams that you have inherited but have never taken the time to evaluate. The raw, unpolished version of yourself, shivering amid the ashes of all that was not genuine, is all that remains once it has burned to the point of no return. Carl Jung was aware of this. It was written by him that people will do anything, regardless of how foolish it may seem, in order to avoid confronting their own soul. On the other hand, once waking begins, it is impossible to resist it. You are drawn inward as a result of gravity, not because of your own free will, but because of the gravity of truth and the gravity of your soul drawing you home. Not only does awakening not make you feel more alive at first, but it also makes you feel as though you are passing away. This is something that no one ever mentions. Simply because you are, in a sense, you are passing away from the illusions, passing away from the person you believe you needed to be, passing away from the roles, the performances, and the unconscious agreements you made in order to comply with the expectations of others. But what else is there? A terrible freedom that you never asked for but secretly always desired. Silence, space, and quiet are all things that they offer. It is not because you inform the people around you that they start to notice it. Rather, it is because you cease playing the game by yourself. When something is no longer hilarious, you stop laughing. When your heart is screaming, no, you stop nodding your head. This is the moment when you cease betraying yourself in order to find solace, serenity, and love that has never actually seen you. And then is when the destruction starts, not in the outside world, but in this very room. Your entire system, which you had previously relied on for validation, identity, and worth, begins to disintegrate. It is not because you despise your relationships that they fall apart. Rather, it is because you finally see them. It is not because you are a slacker that your career is losing its significance. Rather, it is because you are awakening from the delusion that success is hollow. It is not because you have lost your way that your passions change. Rather, it is because the person who sought them is no longer. Awakening is not a form of punishment, but rather a form of cleansing, since it destroys all that is not true. Because the false must be destroyed before the real may be constructed. Before you can recall who you are, you have to first forget who you have been pretending to be. The act of forgetting is not a benign act. Rather, it is anguish and rage. It is the moment when you stand in front of the mirror and realize that you have spent half of your life trying to win the approval of another person. The years that were spent sleeping in a dream that was considered normal are being mourned. And as you are grieving, something more profound comes to the surface. A voice that you haven't heard in years, or possibly ever. Now we begin, says a voice that can be heard muttering beneath the wreckage. So where should we start? Neither a new identity nor a different one, but a return to the essence, a return to present, a return to what has always been there, buried beneath your coping mechanisms, your culture, and your fear. According to Jung, this is the sacred road of individuation, which is the process of becoming who you truly are, going beyond your persona, beyond your projections, and beyond the mask. However, fire is necessary for individuation because the truth cannot coexist with illusion, because authenticity does not allow for pretending, and because completeness necessitates the death of everything that is partial. As a result, the fire arrives, and it consumes the portions of you that were just aware of maintaining your survival. The barriers that you have constructed around your heart are shattered by it. It burns until the only thing that is left is the truth, which is unfiltered, unrefined, and unrestricted. However, how does the sensation of independence be? At first, it is a sense of loss since the cage was cozy, the mask was recognizable, and the dream was lovely, despite the fact that it was not real. And when everything is taken away, you are left with nothing but yourself, naked, vulnerable, and exposed, but most importantly, for the very first time, you are real. The joy that does not require a cause, the grief that is not shameful, the rage that points to boundaries, and a longing that takes you home are all things that you begin to experience that you had forgotten you were capable of feeling. Your soul, rather than your training, begins to influence your perspective on the world, and you begin to view things differently. You are confronted with something that is both stunning and intolerable. You behold individuals who are numbing the same anguish that you earlier denied. You see the systems that are constructed on fear, on control, and on repetition that is done unconsciously. What you see are the roles that injured children play: father, mother, worker, and believer. These are all costumes that they wear. And it tears your heart because you want to shake them, to wake them up, to scream, "Can't you see? Can't you feel it too?" But you remember that you cannot wake anyone up. All you can do is embody the truth and let it ripple through the world. You decide to remain silent, you turn within, and you tend to the flame because you have come to the realization that you are not here to impress others. Rather, you are here to be genuine. You are not here to be comprehended. Rather, you are here to complete in every way. You are not here to relive the events of the past. Rather, you are here to become something that the past was unable to produce. As a result, everything that is false must be destroyed. It is not the burning itself that is the most difficult aspect. Rather, it is the turning of what you believed was love into ash in your hands. In other words, it is coming to terms with the fact that the promises were made to someone who is no longer a part of your life. You have to be aware, down to your very core, that there are certain things that cannot be carried over into the next iteration of yourself. You are not allowed to keep everything. You are not permitted to bring everyone with you. You are not even allowed to preserve the dreams that were formerly considered sacrosanct, because the self that gave birth to those dreams was constructed inside of a prison, and now you are outside of that jail. However, at first, freedom does not feel like wings. Rather, it feels like loss, like floating in a life where gravity has not yet been redefined. Despite the fact that you have lost the ground of who you were, the ground of who you are becoming has not yet established itself. It seems as though you are a ghost in your own life, as you wander aimlessly through your days. However, beneath the surface, your world is disintegrating. You prepare coffee, you respond to emails, and you smile at people you have never met before. Do not continue to write the familiar. It is no longer possible to translate fits the language. People are aware that the rhythm of your previous life now sounds like static where it used to be. They give you the impression that you have changed, but they are oblivious to the fact that you have not changed. Rather, you have unraveled. You pulled away the layers that were not yours, such as the personality that acted, the voice that reflected what others wanted to hear, and the ambition that was driven by the fear of not being sufficient. Moreover, when all of that commotion is removed, a scary phenomenon begins to emerge, quiet, nor the sort that is calm and serene, nor the kind that is shown in films of meditation, but rather a thick and disorienting nothingness in which nothing is certain and everything that was once solid now feels like it was imagined. Within that void, the older version of yourself starts to scream. The ego is not a quiet thing. It deals, it panics, it seduces you with old dreams, and it dangles comfort like a narcotic in front of you. You listen to the words, "Go back, go back. You are safer there." And for a brief while, you believe them. You yearn for the numbness, you yearn for the illusion, and you yearn for the simplicity of a smaller self, a louder universe. and a map that you did not have to draw. The voice of truth, however, is something that is more fundamental, more old, and more profound than the voice of fear. It is something that will not, nonetheless, allow it to happen. No, proceed with your journey, it reads. Use up all of it. Do not turn around, therefore. You continue to walk barefoot through the flames, not because you take pleasure in the discomfort, but rather because the discomfort is evidence that this time it is genuine. This marks the end of the persona, the social mask that you wore so effectively, the identity that was rewarded, and the version of you who knew how to satisfy, perform, and protect others. She passes away, he passes away, and what is left is not yet a new person. It is just space. This is the space that exists before rebirth, the space that Jung referred to when he said, "You are not what happened to you. You are what you choose to become. However, in order to become, you must first confront everything that you have avoided. The grief, the shame, the rage, the longing, and the deep cavernous ache of a soul that has been denied. You have to quit looking for reflections in broken mirrors, stop performing for judges who are not there, and stop outsourcing your contribution to others. And when you do, when you remain still for a sufficient amount of time, you start to notice her or him or it, the particular person who has been there the entire time, hidden behind the noise, beneath the effort, and beneath the script. It is neither the self that has to be proven or the self that needs to be hidden. Rather, it is the self that observes, listens, and breathes in harmony with the cosmos, and it is the self that remembers. Further, that self does not provide you with solutions. It does not provide you a purpose, and it does not guarantee that you will find serenity. Presence is provided, a presence that is so vibrant and uninhibited that even your sorrow is elevated to a sacred level. You start to feel, and you feel it deeply, not only the high notes, but also the low ones, the sadness that hums beneath joy, the dread that trembles behind hope, and the silent wrath that guarded your tenderness. In addition, you do not attempt to drive them away. Rather, you allow them to talk, you permit them to dance, and you permit them to rise and fall like waves from an unending tide. You are now aware that these emotions are not your adversaries. Rather, they are your instructors, they're your guides, and they're the voices of portions that have been banished for a very long time. Finally, you are back at home, and something wonderful occurs with each and every feeling you allow yourself to feel, and with each and every wound you carry without passing judgment on it. Not because life becomes simpler, but rather because you're no longer fighting against it. You become more pliable, more open, and more expansive. You're no longer actively seeking out the light. Rather, you're gaining the ability to sit in the darkness and see, not with your eyes, but with your consciousness. You come to realize that awakening is not about evading life. Rather, it is about approaching existence in a manner that is complete, profound, and unclothed. It is not about rising above suffering. Rather, it is about diving into it to such an extent that it ultimately transforms into wisdom over time. This is not about attaining perfection. Rather, it is about achieving totality, and in order to achieve wholeness, nothing must be left out, not even the aspects that you have been taught to despise. Therefore, you gather them together, the parts that felt excessively, the parts that loved incorrectly, and the portions that pleaded for attention in a variety of inappropriate directions. Calling them home, holding them near, and allowing them to relax are all things that help you gradually regain your humanity. It is not the human that you were conditioned to be, but rather the human that your spirit intends to become here on earth. Not someone who is striking, but someone who is whole. It is not because you have won the war within you that the war within you becomes peaceful. Rather, it is because you have stopped fighting your own reflection. This is the result of you stopping running away from yourself. The areas that are painful no longer need to be separated from the rest of the body. There's no longer any need to act as if the darkness is not yours. No more will you entrust your salvation to someone who is more pious, someone who is more vocal, or someone who is more assured. Possibly for the very first time, you come to the realization that mending is not about correcting anything. Rather, it is about remembering. Remembering the wholeness that was always there, beneath the masks, beneath the trauma, and behind the silence, she said. It's about walking back into the places you once abandoned, not to clean them up, but to sit beside what still aches and say, I'm not leaving you again. That's when the integration begins, not as some flashy transformation, not as an instant miracle, but as a slow, steady reweaving of everything you once rejected. The division of your soul into good and evil is no longer present. Your history is no longer a source of shame, and your future is no longer a source of atonement. Eventually, you come to realize that everything that caused you to break also helped you to build yourself, not in spite of the suffering, but through it. Because it was never about getting away from the darkness. Rather, it was about learning how to contain it, about making room for it, and about realizing that it was not a poison, but rather a medicine. Shadow comes to serve as a teacher. Loneliness serves as a mirror, and loss serves as a guide. As you go through the world, you begin to walk differently. There's no longer a need for you to impress, compete, or justify yourself. You're no longer seeking to be taken seriously. Even if you're not intentionally trying to wake up others who are still asleep, your presence is beginning to wake them up since your clarity exposes that they are confused. Your stillness is a challenge to their clamor, and your reality upsets the illusions they have created. You will learn to stand alone, not as a form of exile, but rather as a form of commitment. You have already committed yourself to what is genuine, to what is complete, and to what does not require performance in order to be worthwhile. As a result, you let go of the need to be liked. Because your soul is not here to be convenient, you make the decision to let go of the idea of bending your truth in order to make other people feel right. Your spirit has come to this world to be free, yet freedom does not equate to anarchy. Alignment is what it means. It means doing fewer things, but meaning more of them. Rather than speaking more, it means saying fewer words. Having the ability to finally hear your own voice, not the voice of your ego or the voice of your fear, but the voice that lies underlying all of that, is what it means to have this ability. The voice that tells you, this is who you are. This is what you came for. This is the life that only you can live. You begin to say no. Not because you are resentful, but because you have realized the consequences of saying yes when it is not in accordance with your values. The reason you begin to relax is not because you are lazy. Rather, it is because you are aware of the distinction between being exhausted and being fulfilled. It is not because you have given up that you decide to stop pursuing, but rather because you have come to the realization that the things that are meant for your soul will never ask you to betray it. And it is in that stillness, in that profound and holy stillness, that a different sort of life starts to develop. A real life, a life that is grounded, and a life that is constructed not from fear, but from the truth. Not a flawless life, not a life that is always exhilarating. When you move, it is no longer because you want to be seen. Rather, you move because your soul has something to say. Now, you don't produce to prove something. Rather, you create because you're filled with ideas. You no longer love to be saved. You love because it is in your nature, and you have finally learned how to love yourself first. It's possible that the world won't applaud this version of you. It couldn't possibly comprehend who you are. There's a possibility that it will label you as weird, selfish, cold, or intense. Nevertheless, this is no longer relevant because you are no longer attempting to belong to a world that has deserted you. Right now, you are a part of the truth. It is the enigma that you belong to. In the unfolding, you are a part of it. And from that place, that point of profound stillness, you start the process of rebuilding. Something new, something slower, something sacred. Not the life you had before, not the dreams you borrowed, not the identity you manufactured in order to survive, but something new, something slower, something sacred. By being truthful, you construct. You construct with your presence. You construct with boundaries that are sculpted out of clarity rather than fear. And gradually, piece by piece, your life starts to pick up where it left off, not in terms of who you ought to be, but in terms of who you truly are. You discover that you are drawn to the souls of various individuals who do not require you to perform. souls who see beyond the grin, souls who sit with you in silence and still hear you. As time goes on, you find that you are yearning for other locations, not the ones that divert your attention, but the ones that showcase who you are. You find that you are praying once more, but this time not with words but with your breath, and not praying for results but for alignment. You have now come to the realization that the universe was never punishing you. Rather, it was purifying you. And as a result, your prayers are no longer desperate. They are steady, and they are submitted. It was not a theft of your life. Rather, it was the return of your life. Furthermore, it is true that it cost you everything that was not real, but in the end, it allowed you to regain your own identity. You look back on the past with reverence rather than regret at this point. Every delusion that was shattered was holy. Every heartache was a gateway, and every fall was a shattering that was absolutely required. For a shell, it was never intended for you to reside inside of it. The beauty in the breaking, the perfection in the anguish, and the poetry in the unraveling are all things that you should see right now. It is clear to you that the darkness was not your adversary. Rather, it was your womb. To give birth to your becoming, it was the pressure that was necessary. Upon your initial awakening, you are not informed of the fact that the truth will not only cost you everything, but it will also leave you with more than you were aware existed. That you will lose people, dreams, and aspects of yourself that you believed you couldn't live without until you experience them. Despite this, you will be able to take more deep breaths than you ever have before. You will be alone yourself, but you will never feel lonely because you are now accompanied by your soul, the soul companion that never deserts you, never lies to you, and never wavers in its commitment to you. You start to comprehend something that very few people ever come to realize. Awakening was not the conclusion. Rather, it was the beginning. This realization comes from the area of inner anchoring. Taking the first genuine breath, taking the first genuine step, and giving the first unfiltered yes to life as it is, rather than how you are hoping it will be. You walk differently now, not quicker, not louder, but with a weightless kind of conviction because you've seen what's beyond the veil. You've seen what went on behind the curtain. Your own depth has been tasted by you. You chose to go into the fire rather than run away from it. Consequently, you now possess a different type of power, one that is not the power to control, but rather the power to surrender power. In other words, the capacity to embody rather than the power to dominate. In the absence of words, your presence speaks for itself. When you remain silent, you heal more than any advice you could ever provide. When you look into your eyes, you see the truth of someone who has passed away and then decided to come back, but this time on your terms. What you are is not what the world has created for you. Rather, you are what you have reclaimed from the ruins. It is not the scars that you are. Rather, you are the healing. It is not the story that you are. Rather, you're the narrator who is rewriting the screenplay in real time with every boundary that you draw, every breath that you recover, and every truth that you ultimately let to live through you. To answer your question, sure, there will be pain. Yes, the globe is still in a state of disarray, and in many respects, it is still unconscious. But you're now aware that you do not have to run away from the world. All you need to do is cease abandoning yourself while you are being inside it. Mostly due to the fact that the conflict was never fought outside, but rather inside. In contrast to the person you were told to be and the person you actually are. When it comes to choosing between the ease of conformity and the bravery of sincerity. When compared to the actuality of freedom, the illusion of safety is more prevalent. You chose freedom, and as a result, you became dangerous, not to other people, but to the lies, to the roles, to the systems, and to the generations of silent souls who passed you their unprocessed grief and called it love. You are dangerous because you chose freedom. You made the decision to remove the chain. Because you made the decision to get back to who you are, you now walk with a clarity that no one can imitate. You possess a gentleness that no one can take away from you. With a light that no one can dim, you burn brightly. And you are aware, to the very depths of your being, that the life you are constructing right now is yours. It is not constructed out of fear. It is not constructed to please. It is not constructed to survive. Rather, it is constructed out of truth, alignment, and soul. If it means that you have to give up the world that you previously knew, then so be it, since what you have won is all that cannot be taken away from you. That being said, if you are currently in the fire, the world you know is crumbling. Your heart is howling at the moon, and you are wondering whether this suffering will ever cease. Your truth is rising, and your heart is wailing. Allow it to shatter, allow it to rise, and allow it to burn, because what lies on the other side is less than just peace. It is power. Aside from clarity, there is also embodiment. This is not simply awakening, it is rebirth. And the first step in the process is having the bravery to let go of things that were never true in order to bring about the transformation into what you truly are. If you're only half alive, you are not here. This is not the place for you to sleepwalk through the dreams of another person. Your presence here is to remember, and it is in the act of remembering that you rise.